Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days. For today's second video, it takes to the middle of February. We go to around the 15th of February, which is day 10. We'll be able to extend out beyond that with the extended GFS and ECMWF, which runs to a couple of weeks. Going to start by having a look at the stratosphere. I haven't talked about the stratosphere for a little while, so I'll show you what's going on in terms of the stratosphere right now to start the video. Just say that today's first video was the ECMWF 30-day look ahead for the UK and for Europe too. That's taking us into the start of March. The ECM has flipped over the past few weeks. The long range ECM model has been showing a cold February. It's now gone mild, and it's showing generally quite a mild and dry picture for February, not just for the UK but for many parts of Europe too. Have a look at that and see what's happened since last week's EC 30-day update. Right, we're going to start off today's second video with the stratosphere. So this is from the JMA, the Japanese Meteorological Agency, showing the temperature at 10 HPA over the North Pole through the winter of 2018-19. So you can see from the black line here how temperatures have been performing at 10 HPA through this winter up to now. The grey line is the trend for this time of the year, or through this point of the year, through the winter. So we had the southern stratospheric one. That was the big story of this winter. In the earlier part of the winter, it happened around Christmas, New Year. You see where the black line was down here before Christmas, and then by the time we got to New Year, the black line was up there, going into genuine southern stratospheric warming levels, taking the temperature from around minus 75 degrees before Christmas to nearly minus 10 degrees at 10 HPA, which is one of the top levels of the atmosphere in the stratosphere, taking it from minus 75 to close to minus 10 Celsius just in a few days, and that does take us to a genuine level of a sudden stratospheric warming. Since then, the temperature has been lowering through January and even the start of February. Gradual process. It hasn't been a dramatic drop, but day by day the temperature's slowly been lowering, and we actually went earlier on in January, we actually went a little bit below the grey line, which is remember the trend line. So we went cold on average towards the end of January. And that's where we are right now, very cold actually, with the temperature at 10 HPA. We're almost at minus 80. About as cold as it's been at any point through this winter. So after the early southern stratospheric warming, not only did it cool down, as you would expect it to, because obviously you can't keep the temperature in the stratosphere at that level for very long, so you expect the temperature to cool down, but not only did it cool down, it also went really quite cold indeed at 10 HPA, and that will strengthen the polar vortex and its roots. So after southern stratospheric warming, which would give the polar vortex and its roots a real pasting in the stratosphere, we've obviously seen a strengthening of the polar vortex at its roots as the temperature has gone much colder. If we go a little bit lower down to 30 HPA, this is what is happening at 30 HPA. So we're not cold on average yet at 30 HPA. We're just there. Again, we can see evidence of the southern stratospheric warming, the temperature lifting up to around minus 35 degrees at 30 HPA. Since when we've been cooling things down very gradually, and where we are right now is around trend, really. We're around the grey line. So at 30 HPA, we're about average with the temperature right now. But at 10 HPA, we're quite a lot colder than average, really cold at 10 HPA. That black line doing a little bit of a plummet. And I think it's about as cold now as it has been at any point through this winter, which of course is unusual because you would expect temperatures to be lifting up at 10 HPA. You see the way the grey line this time of year is rising and continues to rise from now, generally right way through to the summer. So it's quite unusual to see the stratosphere going that cold this late in the winter. So it's been strange, in many ways, been a very strange winter in a lot of ways, and it continues to be quite a strange winter in terms of the atmosphere in the stratosphere. So this is how the temperatures are looking at 10 HPA at the moment. This is meteosil.fr. This is the GFS forecast for temperatures at 10 HPA. So these dark blue colours here, those are the cold temperatures that we've got at 10 HPA, a lot colder than you'd expect them to be at this point of the year. Let's carry on running through and see what happens. So if anything gets even colder, look, the purple colours are beginning to turn up over Greenland. That's taking temperature down to minus 80. Very cold indeed. At 10 HPA over the North Pole in the stratosphere. Those cold temperatures carry on up to the middle of February. That takes us to the 13th, and we can go into extended range with the GFS again, keeping those very cold temperatures going over the North Pole at 10 HPA. No further warming of the stratosphere whatsoever. We're keeping these yellow and green colours around the edges in the mid-latitudes. No sign of them punching back in to the pole. Of course, eventually we will find these blue and purple colours going away. When we get through to the spring, the polar vortex, and into early summer, the polar vortex will kind of die, and we'll see much warmer temperatures to 10 HPA. But certainly up to the 21st of February, which is as far as we can go with the GFS, there is no sign of any further or renewed warming of the stratosphere at 10 HPA, so things are going to remain pretty cold. This from weatheriscool.com. We saw this earlier on in the winter. This is showing the strength of the zonal winds at 10 HPA. So one of the ways we can ascertain how strong the polar vortex is through the strength of the zonal winds. And when we have the sudden stratospheric warming at the end of December and into the new year, we saw the zonal winds going into reverse. So that's zero just there. That's if you're underneath that, you're having a reversal of the zonal winds. So we went from around here, quite a strong zonal wind through the early and middle part of December, to by the end of December and up to the new year, a reversal of the zonal winds with that blue line going down there. Then the zonal winds went back into positive. They can't stay in reverse indefinitely, of course, so they went back into a westerly positive phase. That's where we are with the zonal winds at 10 HPA right now. So actually, although we've got a very cold temperature at 10 HPA in the stratosphere, actually in terms of the zonal winds, we're about where we should be in terms of the strength of the zonal winds. This black line is the trend. The zonal winds should be reducing now through to the summer, of course, as the temperature should be lifting up. So we find that the zonal winds are about where you'd expect them to be. So not overly strong zonal winds, which is interesting given that the temperature at 10 HPA is very cold. It's colder than average, but the zonal winds actually probably still reflecting that sudden stratospheric warming to some degree. The zonal winds are not as strong as you would probably expect them to be with such a cold temperature at 10 HPA. Notice the CFS V2, which is being depicted by the 3 pink and 1 blue line. They want to really lift the zonal winds into very, very strong territory. They're taking the zonal winds up to here, which would be where you'd expect the zonal winds to be with such a cold temperature at 10 HPA. But the GFS and its ensembles, indicated by these green lines just here, they're keeping a more reduced zonal winds, close to average. So that's quite interesting how that's happening. The CFS, a long-range model, wants to really ramp up the strength of the zonal winds at 10 HPA, but the GFS is kind of keeping them on trend. If that's the case, then it does potentially allow for some further weakening of the polar vortex, potentially in the troposphere. But if the polar vortex does strengthen via the zonal winds to that sort of level, then we may be looking at rampant sort of zonality and a rampant zone of polar vortex through the second half of February. A very interesting sort of differential in the strength of the zonal winds at 10 HPA between the GFS, its ensembles, and what the CFS, a long-range model, is showing. So that's quite interesting. We'll have to monitor how that plays out. This is from the ECMWF. This is showing the temperature at 10 HPA as well. So we're starting with today's temperature. You can, on this chart, you can actually see the North Pole itself, helpfully indicated by that black cross just there. So we've got these deep blue colours, of course. Temperatures are cold at 10 HPA on the scale. We kind of like around minus 65 to minus 70. We notice it's probably going to get even colder in the next few days. So that's how things are looking today. In 10 days' time, which takes us to the 14th of February, we find those blue colours are still there at 10 HPA over the North Pole. No change whatsoever. We keep those deep blue colours going. If anything, they have strengthened a little bit, possibly going down to minus 75 or minus 80 at their coldest, which is way colder than average. Again, these orange colours around the edges, those are warmer temperatures at 10 HPA in the mid-latitudes, but they're getting nowhere near to the North Pole. So we're going to keep this cold temperature at 10 HPA going for the foreseeable future, and it's just how strong the zonal winds are going to get in response to that. This again from the ECMWF. This is all coming from the University of Berlin, by the way. You can find a link to this in the description at YouTube and on the links page at Gaz. In fact, all of the links in today's video can be found in the description at YouTube, and most of them are on the links page at Gaz. This is showing the wind and fluxes, the strength of wind and fluxes. Look how strong the zonal winds are at 1 HPA. So that's at the very, very top of the stratosphere. That's where the sun and stratospheric warming started at 1 HPA. The first sign of it was when we had this dramatic plunge in the strength of the zonal winds from there to there. The zonal winds went into reverse at 1 HPA as the sun and stratospheric warming began before Christmas at that level at 1 HPA. So we've been seeing this zonal wind strengthening though, and that's where we are right now with zonal winds at 1 HPA, very, very strong. And we almost go off the scale actually in the next couple of weeks. So that's where we finish up at day 10, just there, virtually off the scale with the strength of the zonal winds. So right at the very, very top of the stratosphere at 1 HPA, an incredibly strong zonal wind indeed. However, lower down at 10 and 30 HPA, which is this box just here, this is where we look to really to determine what's happening in terms of the strength of the polar vortex and the zonal winds in the stratosphere. There we see that, yes, the zonal winds have strengthened. The blue and red lines, blue line is at 10 HPA, the red line is at 30 HPA. We see they have strengthened from the reversal that we had, particularly at 10 HPA earlier in January. But we're not going into a very strong level with zonal winds at 10, 30 HPA. So this is kind of like in line with what the GFS ensembles are showing, actually. We see at both 10 and at 30 HPA, the zonal winds are forecast to be around that level, and that is not as strong as they were back earlier in the winter. This is where they were earlier in the winter before the sudden stratospheric warming just here. So not getting back to that sort of strength, probably quite close to average in terms of the strength of zonal winds at 10 and 30 HPA. 30 HPA, of course, is closer to the troposphere, which is the boundary level of the atmosphere where weather is taking place. So, again, we see this slight disconnect, actually, between how cold it is with the temperature at 10 HPA and a fairly limited strength of zonal winds. Obviously, we know that at 1 HPA, the zonal winds are really, really strong at this level just here. So that's not going to work. Let's see what's going on there. So let's go to there. So you can see that at 1 HPA, the zonal winds are really, really strong. But at 30 and 10 HPA, the zonal winds are not as strong, which is a bit of a disconnect between how cold it is at 10 HPA. And that may be a leftover effect of the sudden stratospheric warming. The zonal winds are not ramping up quite as strongly as you would expect them to do with such a strong polar vortex. This is from the BBC weather forecaster Chris Fawkes. This is a tweet that I saw earlier on today. So Chris Fawkes is saying that anomalies associated with the sudden stratospheric warming are ending. I believe recent UK snow was related to resultant negative Arctic oscillation and movement of stratospheric vortex into North America. Next few weeks are looking mild. Now, he's also got this chart, which has come from stratobserved.com that he's tweeted. And this is basically depicting the Arctic oscillation. So you can see, but it also goes up to the stratospheric level with this chart. So that's kind of like 1 HPA just there. And this is where the level where weather is taking place, the troposphere, which is kind of like 500 HPA to 300 HPA. That's the level. That's 10 HPA just there, the area we've just been talking about, and that's 30 HPA. So those are up in the stratosphere. This is all up in the stratosphere. This is going down into the troposphere. So you've got dates along the bottom. That's December, that's January, and this is where we are right now in early February. So you can see how the blocking signal moved down from the stratosphere, from the top of the stratosphere up here in late December, in towards the 10 to 30 HPA level just here. So that blocking moving down with a weakening of the Arctic oscillation in the stratospheric level through the end of December and into the early part of January. That's depicted by those blue colours. But it's taken a very, very long time to move those blue colours out of the stratospheric level, which is kind of like here, 10 HPA, 30 HPA. That's the stratospheric level. It's taken a very long time to move them out of that level down into the troposphere. Remember, the troposphere is kind of like down here, and it has actually got there just. We have had a tropospheric response. I think we've seen the Arctic oscillation go into the negative territory, particularly through the second half of January, when we dropped the polar vortex down into the north of America. But to be honest, it's not a very strong tropospheric response. I don't think we've had a very strong tropospheric response to this southern stratospheric one. What I say is that we've probably had a partial response. I think we've had a partial tropospheric response to the southern stratospheric one, but I don't think we've had a very strong response to the southern stratospheric warming. Now, what we see here, and this is all part of the forecast, of course, from here. So you'll notice that up in the stratosphere, of course, we've got the zonal wind strengthening, the signal for zonality is strengthening, the polar vortex is strengthening in the stratosphere. And we do see signs of that emerging in the troposphere as well. So again, remember, this is kind of like the troposphere, around 500 millibars just here. And the forecast is definitely showing that the Arctic oscillation is going into positive territory as we're going deeper in towards February. And it is a response to, of course, what's happened in the stratosphere, with the polar vortex increasing at its roots in the stratosphere as temperatures have turned colder. So it looks like we did get a partial response to the southern stratospheric warming. Not a full response, I don't think, within the troposphere. Not as much of a response as you might have expected from such a very pronounced southern stratospheric warming as we had at the end of December. But we did get a partial response to that southern stratospheric warming. But that partial response looks like it's more or less over, and we're going to be seeing the polar vortex increase, and we're going to be seeing the Arctic oscillation beginning to strengthen quite a lot. You can see that on this chart. This is the Arctic oscillation observed and forecast chart. So the black line here tells us where we've been with the Arctic oscillation. The red line's at the end, where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic oscillation to go. You see that this is the 1st of January just here. So that's when the southern stratospheric warming was taking place. At that point, the Arctic oscillation was very slightly positive. Quite quickly, the Arctic oscillation went weakly negative, and then it went back up towards neutral again before falling back towards weakly negative just there. And then we went into a proper negative Arctic oscillation episode through the final sort of 10 days of January. I think that was primarily our partial response in the troposphere to the southern stratospheric warming. That's when we have the partial response. Not lasting all that long. Already we are lifting the Arctic oscillation up, although it is still negative for the time being, but over the next week it looks like from the GFS ensembles the Arctic oscillation is going to be going positive, even to very positive. You haven't seen the Arctic oscillation this positive for a very long time. This black line takes us all the way back into October. That's where it was, for example, in early October. And we haven't seen the Arctic oscillation as positive as the GFS ensembles are forecasting it to be since back to October. So a really strong positive Arctic oscillation episode looks like it's coming. And that, again, is probably in response to that very cold stratospheric temperature that we've got at the moment. We do have a few GFS ensemble members that are breaking away from this very positive cluster and going back to negative, even very negative levels, but they look like they're outliers, and it looks like the real trend within the GFS ensembles is for a very positive Arctic oscillation as we're going towards the middle part of February. At the same time, the North Atlantic oscillation has been positive all the way through this winter. So again, the black line shows where we've been with the NAO, the red line's at the end with the GFS ensembles forecasting the NAO to go. We just had this one little episode of a negative NAO around the new year, but other than that, the NAO has been either around neutral or it's been positive. That's where we are right now, still positive with the NAO, and the GFS ensembles are forecasting the NAO to stay positive. We possibly see a little bit of a reduction in the positivity of the NAO in the next week 2. So for the next week we keep the NAO around where it is right now, but then in week 2 possibly we see a little bit of a reduction back closer towards neutral for the NAO. But there's no sign really of a negative NAO. We do have these few outlier members again, but are negative, but they're sort of outliers. Most of the GFS ensembles are keeping the NAO in positive territory at the same time as the NAO is strengthening positive, going very positive in fact. At the same time as the AO, I should say, is going very positive. So putting those two together and combining it with what's happening with those very cold temperatures at 10 HPA, albeit the zonal winds aren't quite as strong as you might expect them to be with such a cold temperature at 10 HPA, I think basically it's telling us that we're in for a westerly episode, and it looks unlikely we're going to get too much in the way of cold weather for the foreseeable future. So these are how the GFS ensembles are looking in terms of the upper air temperature and precipitation. This is looking at Brighton today, another place on our suggested list of locations of this section of the video. So, upper air temperatures are very mild at the moment. They're going to be staying generally mild over the next few days. It looks as though into the weekend and early next week we get a little bit of a cold snap just for a day or so. Sunday to Monday, the wind swings into the north and we get a little bit of a cold snap. Might even bring a few snow showers to northern parts of the country. But after that, it looks like most of next week is actually turning very mild. Now, we have still got quite a lot of scatter within the GFS ensembles. However, most of these upper air temperatures are in this sort of level, which is either mild or very mild with the upper air temperatures. These ones down here that are colder, and it's only going away from it, they are genuinely cold. Each of ensemble members, they are outliers, they're not well supported. Most of the GFS ensembles are going into mild or very mild territory through this middle part of February. At the same time, things are turning drier as well. So for the next week, we've got quite a lot of precipitation coming up, some bouts of rain moving in from off the Atlantic. But from early next week onwards and then through to the second half of February, it looks pretty dry. So we've got a drying but warming trend within the GFS ensembles today, albeit we still have these few cold outlier members that are down here, but I think you have to say that the broad trend within the GFS ensembles is to take things into potentially very mild territory if high pressure sets up to our south through the middle of February. Temperature anomalies from the 5th to the 13th of February, milder than average for the UK, that milder than average through most parts of Europe as well. Precipitation anomalies a little bit wetter than average through the UK. I expect those to trend drier over the next few days as high pressure becomes more influential through the course of next week. Remember, it's taking us from today, the 5th, Tuesday the 5th, to Wednesday the 13th. So as more of next week comes into this time frame, I expect these anomaly charts to trend drier. That's how the GFS is looking for Friday. Low pressure coming in off the Atlantic, looking rather wet and windy, keeping things very unsettled into the weekend as well. As that low pressure clears away on Sunday, that's that little northerly dropping the temperature on Sunday to Monday. So a little bit of a cold snap, Sunday to Monday, as this ridge builds in. It will produce night frost and maybe some snow showers for northeastern parts of the country. However, very quickly, this ridge is being flattened off and it's moving down over towards France and the Alps. We're starting to pull much milder air around the top of that ridge of high pressure. And so through next week, it just gets milder and milder, really. Now, for southern and eastern parts of the country, we are very close to that ridge. So although the upper air temperatures would be mild there on the GFS ensembles, because we're very close to this ridge, down on the surface, it is possible it will still be quite cold from frost and fog. So that's the one caveat about this. Everything's pointing towards mild, or even very mild, as we're going towards mid-February. But one caveat is the exact position of that ridge next week, because if it's centred over the UK, then even though the upper air temperatures are lifting up, we will still get inversion cold, which will produce night frost and fog. That'd be particularly for England and Wales. For Scotland and Northern Ireland, you see we're bringing up these southwesterly winds from off the Atlantic, so it would be very mild for Scotland and Northern Ireland next week with that. But for England and Wales, it's possible, just possible, but it might actually be quite a cold week next week from frost and fog and an inversion. We won't know until closer to the time frame. Now, a little bit beyond day 10, Saturday the 16th of February, here comes this very mild push of winds from the southwest, and then that takes into the extended range, looking really mild, back well in temperatures into mid-teens Celsius if it came off. That's how we finish up for the end of the GFS run, which is Thursday, the 21st of February. High pressure dominating over into the east of the UK. High pressures out to west. Look how strong the polar vortex still is around Greenland with these purple colours. Really strong PV up there. And this will be bringing up very mild air from the south, but still quite dry and maybe with some fog. That's how the parallel GFS run is looking for Friday. Wet and windy, low pressure sweeping in off the Atlantic. There's that little northerly snap as we go from sunny into money. It does get a little bit colder. Then we've got this ridge of high pressure. So for England and Wales on Tuesday next week, probably quite cold. Mild winds already starting to return to Scotland and Northern Ireland. Through next week, increasingly mild west-southwesterly winds pushing in as this high pressure kind of like slips over towards eastern parts of Europe. So again, the placement of that high pressure, a lot of uncertainty with that. This is how things are looking at day 10. Quite unsettled and relatively mild with parallel GFS run, and then this goes on to the extended range, much more of an influence from low pressure, so it's a lot more unsettled in the extended range with the parallel GFS compared to the operational, but they're both in agreement really that we either have it mild and settled or it's mild and unsettled, but they're both in agreement that the winds are piling in from off the Atlantic. That's how things look at the end of a parallel GFS run on Thursday, the 21st of February. Again, notice how strong the polar vortex is around Greenland and away to our north. This is shaping up to be a very mild February if these GFS charts are correct. Albeit we have started February on quite a cold note, of course, so we do have to take that into account. This is how the ECM is looking. Again, unsettled at the end of the week and into next weekend. There's that little northerly snap from Sunday through to Monday. In fact, it does make a little bit more of that northerly wind. So that's a genuine cold snap that we've got there early next week. However, very quickly, we find high pressure setting up to our south. That infiltrates milder air around the top of the ridge from off the Atlantic. Going up towards day 10, we've got high pressure across central east parts of Europe and low pressure out in the Atlantic, and we're pulling up these mild or potentially even very mild southerly winds. These are the options that are on the table within the ECM ensembles today from the Icelandic Met Office. At day 10, which is the 15th of February, we look like this. So we've got 16 ECM ensemble members that have high pressure centred over or to the east of the UK. They would be quite dry and potentially fairly cold, I would have thought, with the wind coming from a southeasterly direction. That includes the control member of the ECM ensembles. Then we've got 14, including the operational run, the run that we were just looking at, that have high pressure centred to the east and southeast, low pressures out to the northwest. These are pulling up much milder southerly winds or southwesterly winds, so they're very mild options. There's 7 that have high pressure centred across Scandinavia. They look quite cold with easterly winds coming in, but then there's another 7 that have low pressure to the northwest, high pressure to the south, and these are bringing in mild southwesterly winds. So a real split within the ECM ensembles at day 10, and then there's a further 7 that have a ridge over Scandinavia, but they extend it down through the UK, low pressures out in the middle of the Atlantic. They're probably mainly dry and potentially a little bit cold from frost and from fog. So there's almost looks like there's a 50-50 split really between the ECM ensembles at day 10 between the milder and colder options. 2 weeks out, which is 360 hours, taking us to the 20th of February, we've got 28 members of the ECM ensembles that are very unsettled, with low pressure out to the west and bringing in this strong southwesterly or westerly wind. So they're mild and unsettled ensemble members. And then there's 23 members of the ECM ensembles that have high pressure to our north. They're bringing colder easterly winds. So again, at 2 weeks, it's almost, not quite, but almost a 50-50 split between mild and unsettled, or cold and dry. Finally, this is how the CFS V2 is looking for the next month. So these are the 500 millibar heights broken down into week periods. The first week period takes us from the 5th to the 11th of February, with above average heights to our south, below average heights out to the northwest. So it's a bit of a blocking signal around Greenland. But for us, we're bringing up these mild west or southwesterly winds. So those ones are unsettled and relatively mild in the week ahead. Week 2 looks like that. It's the 12th to the 18th of February. This is a big change on what the CFS has been going for over the past few weeks for February. Real change in line with what the ECM has done in its with its long range model as well for February. They're both shifted towards much milder outcomes now. High pressure to the south, low pressure to the northwest, bringing up those west or southwesterly winds through the middle part of February. Week 3 is the 19th to the 25th of February, with the above average heights centred over Scandinavia, below average heights in the middle of the Atlantic. So these are trying to get the wind into a cold easterly, but actually they're probably bringing up relatively mild southerly winds. Only a slight adjustment, though, would make that a little bit colder, I have to say. It would only take a slight adjustment to be pulling in winds from the east. And then we go through to week 4, which is the 26th of February to the 4th of March. It's the same idea, really. Low pressure in the middle of the Atlantic. High pressure is up towards Scandinavia. The model will say mild, because the model thinks we're bringing up southerly southeast winds. But again, only ever such a slight adjustment. Just take a little bit of energy from this trough down here. Very slight adjustment would start pulling in much colder easterly winds. So weeks 3 and 4, a little bit there still for anybody that wants cold weather. If you read between the lines, temperature anomalies for the weekend, the 5th to 11th of February, much milder than average. Week 2, temperature anomalies, very mild. Look at this. This is the 12th to the 18th of February. Now looking very, very mild indeed. Not just for the UK, but for most of Europe as well. Really, really mild through the middle of February. Now, week 3 is also shaping up to be milder than average. This is the 19th, 25th of February. The model thinks we're pulling up the wind from a southerly type direction, so it wants to keep those mild temperature anomalies going. And that continues into week 4 as well. The 26th of February to the 4th of March still comes out with above average temperature anomalies. But again, do remember, it will only take ever such a slight adjustment there in weeks 3 and 4 to start turning things a lot colder. So it looks like the evidence, certainly up to the middle of February, is for the weather to become increasingly mild, and the only question is where that ridge is going to sit next week. That's still causing a few headaches. We only get a cold snap Sunday to Monday, and then after that the ridge built in. Now, if that ridge sticks around the UK, because we've had a cold snap initially, then even though the upper air temperatures would be mild, it would be relatively cold on the surface, and we'll get an inversion. However, what I think is going to happen is that very quickly next week, we will pull in mild southwesterly winds around the top of that high pressure, initially to Scotland, Northern Ireland. England and Wales might string a couple of frosty nights together early next week, but I think by the middle of next week we probably infiltrate quite a lot of cloud and mild temperatures to all parts of the UK around the top of that ridge, and then I would expect that goes on up to the middle of February, and it possibly gets very mild sometime around mid-February, Valentine's Day, 15th, 16th February. We might get some very mild temperatures indeed, given the right conditions. Might get a bit of phone effect, might see temperatures into the mid, who knows, possibly even upper teens Celsius, can't be ruled out. Then maybe things go colder again in the final week to 10 days of February. There's not much evidence of that, I have to say, at the moment. So it's sort of a bit disappointing if you want cold weather, but of course a lot of people watching this are going to like mild weather, and it's good news for you. Maybe even, you will say, a little taste of spring for the middle part of February. We shall have to see about that. So that's brought you up to date with weather next week, 10 days. It's brought you up to date what's happening in the stratosphere as well. Very extended video today. I hope you found it interesting and informative. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.